Hi, Gregor. Nice to have you on today. I thought
Thanks so much for having me, Tom. It's a great pleasure.
yeah, I really look forward to having you back in Europe this year. And I think you already did a European tour last year, but I guess in general, your teaching was also internationally a little bit reduced over the last 3 years. So I'm super excited to have you back coming to GaiaYoga in Zagreb. But also I saw that you're going to Poland, to Czechia, to Spain, Germany, to Greece. So you have a lot coming up.
That's right. Yes, I'm also very excited to be able to travel again. I was basically locked up in Australia for 2 years with the borders being closed, and that was a very, very strange experience. Suddenly, not to be allowed to leave the country, it felt a little bit as if we were living in North Korea or in a place like that.
And you already live very remote, right? In your house in the jungle, right? So it must have been
Yes,
even more
yeah.
intense in that sense.
Well, that was actually really nice, that part of it, because we were completely free of moving around here. Whereas I think for people in the city, I have a lot of students in Melbourne, and some of them were locked up in the houses for, almost a year. I think it was 260 days. So they were not allowed to go out. And yeah, it was awful. The roads were patrolled by the military, etc. It was very strange.
Yeah. But okay, those times hopefully are behind us and you're coming back to Zagreb.
Yes.
And I think we did a great program again this time because last time when you came, you did a Ashtanga class and you did a lot of pranayama and yogic meditation and a little bit of Sanskrit and yoga philosophy. And so
Hmm.
this time I also wanted to really get into some of the newer topics. I mean, you have written, I think, 2 or 3 or 4 more books since last time we saw each other in 2019. And so this
Yeah.
time we will also have tantric meditation and mudra. And I just wanted to first
Yes.
ask you, I mean, you have this immense experience in practicing all these things, and from the books I've read and the workshops I did with you, also this immense time that you spent in all the literature of the yogis, in Indian literature,
Mm.
etc., that you then comprise into those books. And so, how um, how is that process of like coming up with these topics? And like, is it first the experience of the practice? Is it first the knowledge from the books? And like, how does it come together?
It's both. There is a very strong biographical element to it. So in some ways, the books are, as I've written them, they're in some ways tracing my own spiritual evolution. At sometimes they're just projects that I'm researching for a really, really long time. For example, the Mudras book, I was working on this book for probably more than 20 years, but it never really was like a project that was right in the foreground. And so it was always relegated to the second, third, or fourth more important project. And it was only during the pandemic that I finally had the time. Okay, now I finished it off. So yeah, it's some of that material is 20 years old in that book.
Mm, great. And so, just to, I mean, we will have actually 2 days of workshops, but they will be quite similar. Like we have one day with the guided asana class, Ashtanga class, plus Yoga Sutras and Sanskrit chanting, and Tantric meditation and Mudra. And the next day, it's the Mysore, but then the rest of the day is the same as the first day, which I find is always great because you can integrate and continue the topics the next day and get some more aha
That's
moments.
right.
And but
Yeah.
tell me a little bit, like for example, this tantric meditation. Uh, it's much more like easily approachable than the yogic meditation. I think you said one time, and
Yeah.
so maybe go in a little bit into that. Like what's to be expected from that?
Yeah, so the main difference is that the yogic meditation, which we could also call chakra kundalini meditation, is a single technique that you make more and more complex over the years as your mind becomes more concentrated and powerful. The yogis would say pure. What they mean with that is the ability to concentrate on a single object. So you take more and more layers on. And that makes the meditation. And so the advantage is that you basically can't space out in yogic meditation because it's so complex that you will fall out of the meditation as soon as there's a little bit of bandwidth of your mind doing something else in the background, which our minds tend to do from this whole culture of multitasking that we have developed. Now, the yoga meditation, for that reason, is difficult for some people. I found that about over the years, almost half of my students had difficulties with that meditation. And so over the years, I thought, it would be fantastic to have a different meditation system for people who are struggling with that meditation. And the Tantric meditation was a meditation to which I was introduced again more than 40 years ago, and which I've sort of practiced on the side. And yeah, at some point I decided, okay, let's systematically analyze it. It goes back to a text which is called the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, which is a Shaivite Tantra. A bit of a disclaimer, the term Tantra in the West sort of often has a bit the connotation of sacred sex. And that is because, or let's put it like that, there is actually 800 different tantras that are texts. Yeah, the texts are called the tantras. They come from a particular historical epoch. And in all of the passages, maybe 1 or 2% deal with what we could call sacred sex. So there is a lot described, yeah. And in the Vijnana Bhairava, there's actually 112 meditation techniques, of which only 2 deal with sex. So let's just leave that connotation aside for a moment. The Vijnana Bhairava is an amazing collation of meditation techniques, which in themselves, some of them come from the Upanishads, some of them come from yogic culture, some of them come actually from the Hatha Yoga tradition, and some of them come from Advaita Vedanta, and some of them are Buddhist. So it's very interesting. It's a very eclectic collection of meditation techniques. And yeah, I will grab a few of them and teach them in that workshop. Some of my favorite ones, obviously. And what's beautiful about them is that the techniques are simple. Yeah, so the instruction is, when you look at yogic meditation, we have this entire corpus of instruction, but which you have to take into consideration. But with those tantric meditations, it's usually just a few sentences, do it, and if it doesn't work, don't worry about it, go on to the next technique and see whether that clicks with you, So you could maybe pick out half a dozen of techniques and simply just go with the one that you find the most accessible.
Oh, great. Nice. And I also like how so it sounds a little bit like it also rose out of the necessity of what you saw as a teacher. So your students, half of them don't really stick with the yogic meditation. So let's see what else I can offer them and how to give them what they need in that moment. I like that.
Yeah, and especially what I notice is that if people have a lot of stress in their life, or their minds are already very overloaded, then a technique like yoga meditation is difficult because it's a complex meditation technique. Sorry.
No problem.
It's early in the morning. My voice is a bit scratchy. I'm not used to be talking a lot early in the morning. Yes, and so the beauty of tantric meditation is that it works for people who want to empty their mind and relatively quickly attain sort of a state of stillness.
That actually sounds great, because also a lot of people that do some kind of Ashtanga practice or asana practice in general ask themselves, so what's the best way to start doing a little bit of meditation on the side, or to support that asana practice. And so I guess starting with a yogic meditation as you teach it, that is very complex, is like a whole new project, while these tantric meditation techniques can be quite easily incorporated by doing 5 minutes more after or before the asana practice.
That's right. So in some ways, yogic meditation is like an enormous project to start. It's a bit like starting, Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga. Yeah. It's just like, okay, there's bandhas, there's drishtis, there's the breathing, there's the sequence, then there is details to the asanas. You have to learn a lot of stuff. So the elegance of tantric meditation is that it's techniques that allow you to sort of stick your toes into the water, rather than to dive straight in and learn sort of like an entirely complex new discipline.
Yeah. And what's your approach to mudra? I mean, I know that I have studied a lot of the mudra from teachers like yourself, but also like from your generation that have intensely studied with yogic masters and have a quite good connection between the Western physiology and anatomy and the Eastern idea of mudra. But yeah, just maybe talk a little bit about how you approach mudra and how, again, it's relevant to anybody that practices asana or meditation or pranayama.
Yeah. So let's try to define mudra first. That's the problem. The term is actually difficult to define. It means an energetic seal. Yeah. So bandhas are obviously mudras. Yeah. Bandha is sort of like a small group in the larger group of mudras. Yeah. Most people, when they hear the term mudra, they think of hasta mudras. This is, for example, a hasta mudra. Hasta means hand. Yeah. Now, these hasta mudras are used in yoga, but they are not very important. They're not very in the foreground. Mudras are usually techniques like, for example, Viparita Karani Mudra is a shoulder stand that is held for a long time and in a high quality vertical position. And the Jiva Bandha, the tongue lock, is added. Yeah, so that would be an important mudra. And then, of course, to roll your eyes up is another very famous one, where the eyes are rolled up. It's sort of like an extreme version of Bhrumadhya Drishti. So in order to understand mudra, it's the best to order them according to function. Yeah, because interestingly enough, mudra is not on a yogic limb. Yeah, in Patanjali Yoga, mudra is not one of the 8 limbs. And so the reason why not is because there are mudras which are associated with each limb. For example, there are mudras which are predominantly asanas, such as the Viparita Karani Mudra. And then there are mudras which are adjuncts to pranayama, and there are mudras which are adjuncts to meditation. But then there is another group which is quite fascinating, which are called Kundalini raising mudras. There would be things such as Mahamudra, Mahabandha Mudra, Mahaveda Mudra. They are mudras used to trigger the surge of Kundalini energy. And then there are mudras associated with samadhi. They're designed to induce samadhi. Yeah. So probably the first step would be to understand that there are these groups of mudras and what do we want to do. Then also, if we look into tradition, it's been treated completely differently. For example, Krishnamacharya, who was a Vaishnavite. Vaishnavites are Hindus who are following, Vishnu as the divine. When you look into the so-called Vaishnavite yogic texts or the Vaishnavite tantras, the mudras are all classed under what they call sthirata. That means fortitude. Yeah, so you do a mantra, a mudra, to create fortitude, to stabilize the body. So predominantly they're physical mudras, and that's what Krishnamacharya was into. Yeah, whereas if you look into the Shaivite tradition, that's a different branch of Hinduism in which the Lord Shiva is in the foreground. It's the mudras are all Kundalini raising mudras, so they are designed to bring about powerful spiritual experiences. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing to look at. And then, of course, the individual mudras, to pick some out and see what you can actually achieve with mudra.
Yeah, I find it super fascinating that, and that what I also loved about the previous workshops with you, that it's this very practical approach, but at the same time, like this deep immersion into, okay, why are we doing this, and what does it actually mean, and learning from somebody that is so well versed in all these things and can really explain it from a deep understanding of the Eastern philosophy and idea, but also in a way that is approachable for us Westerners, right? So I really appreciate that.
I think for Western students, it's very important to understand why they are doing something and why certain things are not done. Yeah. And it's good if these questions can be raised and answered. Obviously, I don't have the answer to all questions. If I don't, I will say so. But yeah, I suppose I've studied this subject, yoga, full time for my whole life. And so there's quite a few questions which I can answer. And of course, there is this very important saying, if you don't know where you're going, you end up somewhere else. Yeah. So that's why I think it's very, very efficient if we do a yogic technique and it doesn't just come from, just do it. Don't worry about it. Just do it. Well, do I actually want to where this technique takes me to? Yeah. Is that a goal, a destination that is, how do you say, consistent with where I personally want to go? Yeah, I think it's if I know all of these things and the answer is yes, then I'm much more congruent in my practice. I practice with much more confidence, and yes, I know what I'm doing, because I think what's a big obstacle is that in yoga is that students do techniques and they are, why should I do that? Do I really want it? And they often do them from a feeling of, I should do that. Yeah, I know that somehow it's good for me, but it's a vague feeling. And actually, I don't want to, but I goad myself into doing it because I think I should. That's not such a great attitude to practice from. It's more like the attitude, well, I really practice because I want to. I'm actually thirsty for it.
Yeah. And I mean, just to add to that, because it's of course always not black and white, right? Because you want to kind of know where you're going, and hopefully that comes also from a trusting teacher or a teacher that you can trust, and you want to kind of understand, but at the same time stay open to the experience, right? Which shouldn't be like made like you don't want to focus too much on, okay, what exactly it is I'm doing, in the sense of overthinking it. You want to be in the experience, but at the same time have an understanding and intelligence about how to approach these things. And that's why I I mean, especially practicing Ashtanga, there's many teachers and many approaches. And I always asked myself, especially with lots of injuries going on in Ashtanga and lots of things that I didn't quite understand, okay, what is the teacher saying that has been doing this for 50 years, you know, or who is 60 years old and has a somewhat aging body, right? Because until 40, 45, you can always kind of get through it. But, you know, if somebody is like yourself or other people that I have practiced with, you know, if they are 60 and they are still practicing it, there must be something that they're doing right. And what they tell the students must have some deeper, must have been proved through time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is very important because, you know, unfortunately, yoga has become such a visual thing. And a couple of years ago, somebody sent me a link which was to a reality TV show dealing with yoga. And it was basically about Instagram influencers who became yoga celebrities. But the interesting thing is that they were all from LA, from the area around Hollywood. And they were all either gymnasts or actors or dancers or models that had been attracted to Hollywood, and they were trying to stage a career. So they were all very beautiful and had very beautiful bodies and perfect bodies. And that there was sort of a whole subculture of people who failed in landing like a big gig in the film industry. And then they looked around, what can I do? And they saw yoga, and they saw that you can take a couple of spiffy photos and then in amazing asanas, and they had all these perfect bodies, yeah. And, you know, published them on Instagram. And some of these people had never done yoga. And within a week, they had a following of 600,000 people on Instagram. So, you know, you have people who are genetically gifted. They end up having these huge followers. And because they're beautiful and young, people think that's yoga. Well, the problem is that these people are not authorities in yoga. Yeah, as you said, there's a lot to be said about somebody who has maybe practiced for half a century and learned from their own mistakes, and then can teach yoga from an enormous body of experience and get their students to avoid these mistakes and don't fall into the body beautiful and, yeah, I can strut my stuff, you know, cul-de-sac. It is a cul-de-sac. You have to turn around and go back and find another way. It doesn't lead anywhere.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for. I mean, you know, you're obviously not the big hit on Instagram, right? Do you have an Instagram account? I don't even know. Ah, you do?
I do.
I didn't find you.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I will look you up again. But that's why we're also doing this video, right? So people can listen to the conversation and hopefully get that curiosity of like finding out a little more about the depth of yoga that you will teach in Europe on your tour next year again.
Thank you. Yeah, I really look forward to it, to share all of that. And yeah, I think it will be, hopefully we'll have a great time together.